In a story where countless pirates embark on a perilous voyage in order to find a cryptic treasure left by the previous pirate king, our favorite protagonist, Monkey D. Luffy, finds himself at the forefront of numerous adventures. Whether it be defeating evil clowns, mercenaries, corrupt marine officials, and pirates adorning false crowns from stolen kingdoms. Vying for the Pirate King's crown has placed Luffy on a quest that goes beyond finding utopic riches. Luffy's innocuous adventures leads him to a point in time where, while carrying a 900-year-old legacy on his shoulders, he must fight to restore the world's balance. It goes without saying that Eiichiro Oda has crafted perhaps one of the most extensive worlds and characters in fiction, meticulously capturing a range of absolute weirdness and surprisingly banal locations, as well as colorful and well developed characters. Within 10 minutes of watching or reading One Piece, it is clear that while Oda has a fruitful imagination, part of his success comes from driving inspiration from the realm of our reality. Not only history, but humanity's lasting evidence of teachings through storytelling, the masterful adaptation of mythology. Admittedly, the presence of Buddhist mythology in One Piece is abundant, but given the substantial amount of analysis provided by other fans, I like to shift the attention towards another possible inspiration. I believe that Oda utilizes Celtic themes and motifs, albeit with a subtler approach, and certainly not as exclusively and clearly as Buddhist mythology. So let's get into it, shall we? Moving forward, I'll go into more detail about specific concepts within Celtic mythology, seeing as if I were to talk about the subject as a whole, would be here for a week. For this video, I'll focus more so on Irish mythology, and we'll cover Welsh in part 2. You don't necessarily need to read the literary work that I'll be covering, given that I'll provide a quick summary and use quotes that encompass the overarching theme and motifs. Let's begin with a seemingly trivial tradition. For the early Celts, the world was oriented with the rising sun. This belief is called dashel, which in Old Irish may translate to turning south, turning right, or going with the sun. If you're in the northern hemisphere, the sun arches slightly towards south, towards right when setting. While very little is known as to how the Celts, particularly the Irish, perceived their gods and goddesses, it is evident through their traditions that the sun is hugely important, that the sun god is important. The sun is the organizing feature of the universe. To move against the direction of the sun is to move against divine order. I give the little preface to the sun not only because Luffy possesses the traits and powers of Nika, who was venerated as a sun god, as well as the plethora of sun symbolism involving other influential figures in One Piece, such as the Kozuki clan and the Sun Pirates, but also because Dashel's relation to divine order plays a part in the notion of Kogoris. Kogoris can be roughly translated to balance according to a divine order. It is the relationship of the cosmos and an individual within the cosmos. It is like being the string in the web of life. And so Kogoris is not so much about good and evil, but more so about order and balance versus disorder and chaos. This larger theme of balance translates through important traditions. For example, in terms of royal duties, a king's responsibility to uphold his kingdom's order goes beyond fighting battles or maintaining riches. The early Celts believed in sacral kingship. That is, a king's virility dictates the fertility of the land. If a king could no longer perform, the land and subsequently every inhabitant would suffer, whether it be of famine, diseases, war, or all the aforementioned. Basically, death. Therefore, a king and his actions are not to be thought of as that of a sole individual, but of an individual who has duties according to a cosmological order, and an individual who is directly tied to his people and the land. After euhemerization realized through condescentio, sacral kingship was reinterpreted as hierogamos, or sacred marriage. For those that don't know, euhemerization is when stories of gods and goddesses are retold as stories of powerful humans, whether they be royals or heroes. And condescentio is a Christian method of conversion that functions by not completely bashing pagan beliefs, but rather by reinterpreting it through a Christian framework. Think of Saint Bridget, for example. She's believed to have been a goddess, but she was reinterpreted as a saint. The assessment of sacred marriage came from comparative mythologist, more so than anthropologist, Sir James Frazer in his book The Golden Bowl in 1890. He claimed that sacred marriage entailed the marriage between heaven and the earth, the union of a sky god and an earth goddess, and that this marriage was often acted symbolically by real people. Furthermore, through a Christian lens, the outcome of the land was no longer associated with a king's virility, but rather with how just, merciful, and truthful a king was. The Testament of Moran, presumably written not long after the Christianization of Ireland, details the traits expected of a king. Let him preserve truth, it shall preserve him. Let him exalt mercy, it exalts him. Let him care for his tribes, they will care for him. Let him help his tribes, they will help him. Let him soothe his tribes, they will soothe him. As it continues, although there is great emphasis on the Christianized traits, detailed by the repetition of it is to the truth of a ruler, there are still remnants of the ancient Celts' idea of the connection between the ruler and the fertility of the land. Now look, there is no sexual virility in sacred marriages involved in One Piece. Although sexual virility, I'll give that to Oden because he was shown to be getting some. I just feel like it would be a huge disservice to Celtic mythology and Celtic history if I were to just jump at the Christianized version of it, setting no precedent whatsoever. The takeaway here is that underlying the basic notion of how a good and prosperous king will bring about a good and prosperous land are the traditions related to fertility and balance. Generosity and truthfulness don't exist in a vacuum. They are part of a cosmological order, one that dictates the outcome of the land and its people. And I believe the same can be said for One Piece. The second battle of Tuired is a tale detailing what fared to the kingdom of the Tuatha Dé Dannan when King of Gods Nuadu had to step down after losing his hand in the first battle against the Firbolg. Nuadu had to instate Brez, son of Elata, one of the kings of the Fomoire, in hopes of straightening the alliance between the Tuatha Dé Dannan and the Fomoire. Brez turned out to be an unsuccessful king. Tuatha Dé Dannan warriors were reduced to menial chores, and the poets found no hospitality in the king's court. The warriors lost their might, the fertility of the land was contravened by the surrendering of crops and produce in tribute, and on top of everything, the king lacked generosity. Fearing being overthrown, Brez contacted his father Elata in hopes that he would aid him in maintaining the throne by force. Elata directs him to Baylor, a masterful Fomorian warrior champion. At this point, King Nuadu gives his seat to a warrior named Samildanach, which may translate to one skilled in diverse arts. But the warrior calls himself Lug. In Irish mythology, Lug was one of the first known and considered to be among the most important gods. He is the god of oaths, justice, and nobility, and he is believed to represent sun and light. The Tuatha Dé Dannan are a tribe of gods. They are comprised of Aes Dana, people of arts. and the Fomoire are a tribe of demons, sometimes said to be comprised of evil gods or comprised of monstrous beings. Throughout the Second Battle of Tuired, there is great emphasis on disorder born from an unfit king, bringing about the downfall of a kingdom. It takes a true king, a Samildonach, to re-establish the kingdom back to its glory. Luke's introduction is seemingly that of an outsider who possesses royal attributes nonetheless, and is given the permission of an actual chief of gods to rule in his stead in order to achieve victory in the upcoming bloody battle. Luke seeks people from each section within the kingdom and asks if and how they can fight. He reorganizes the society left in shambles by Bress in a way that not only places people on their rightful positions, but also cultivates a hierarchy where people can help themselves. While far from a man of many skills, Luffy possesses what appears to be an innate ability to organize and inspire society the same way Luke does. I'll use a more recent example, Momonosuke. While Luffy agreed to help him, he didn't allow himself to feel pity for Momo when he was acting unfit for a shogun. In fact, Luffy scolds him and urges him to properly play his part in not only the role that he has in his own country, but in the grand scheme of the story. Now, I am not saying that Luffy is in any way aware or even concerned with their roles in a cosmological sense, but more so that his instincts seem to be connected with a divine order. While Oden was unruly during his childhood and teenage years, and even well into his adulthood at times, he never acted cowardly, and he trusted his conviction wholeheartedly. Toki is similar in that she never feared death, and she believed in the power of her message and legacy to be carried out 20 years later. For Momo and Hiyori to act beneath that precedent as sole survivors of the Kozuki clan would be dishonorable of the blood that runs through their veins, and of the order that they must follow as rulers within the world that they are part of. Kogoris, the role of the individual within the whole. I know that Sukiyaki is also a survivor, but I feel like he falls more so under the trope of ritualistic sacrifice of a king who is no longer perfect. Much like Nuadu with Lug. Nuadu is a good ruler, but he recognizes that he is no longer perfect. So, in order for the land to survive, in order for inhabitants to survive, he must step aside. Oden also has some aspects of Lug in him, and given the close connection the Kozuki clan had with the D clan, it doesn't come across as all that surprising, seeing as I'm operating on the notion that people from the D clan are the equivalent of the Tuatha Dé Dannan and of the Fomoire, but I'll touch on that later. While his samurais were admittedly either thugs or aimless, Oden saw the potential for who they could be and instigated their reinstatement in society by inspiring them to be better, even at times when he necessarily didn't want to. And not only did they become better people, they also became full fledged warriors, samurais, and leaders. A bit like how all of the Straw Hats will follow Luffy given that he's their captain, but in the event of separation, you'll often see them fighting their own battles, or even leading their own groups of people into battle. And even when they're not separated, Luffy knows his own faults, and he has no issue in following his crewmates when he finds himself either lost or confused. All of which parallels to Luke's creation of a hierarchy where people can help themselves. If you're wholly dependent on one sole leader and one sole warrior, the leader and subsequently the group under his lead are more likely to fail. Think of Law, for example. He tends to carry the weight of battles all on his shoulders, possibly because he fears putting the people that he cares about in danger, but that's a topic for a whole other video. But him carrying the weight of battles results in his crew not being as well versed in fighting and averting crises or dealing with crises as the Straw Hats are. And what we're left with is a situation as dire as the outcome of his fight against Blackbeard. I have to move on before I get too emotional thinking about it. We see Luffy offer the same level of bluntness that he offers to Momo towards Shirahoshi and Vivi, although Vivi is different than Shirahoshi in that she and Luffy show one another how to be proper leaders. Vivi urged him to be merciful and humble in Drum Island instead of attacking people aimlessly. Some battles are not worth the fight. And Luffy urged Vivi not to take everything on her shoulders and to learn how to trust her people and her friends. A much needed advice for the emo princess that we mentioned before. I'm gonna get pissed if I'm sorry. Let's keep going. We're good to go. Forever emotionally scarred. But we're good to go. Luffy and Vivi basically teach one another that a leader must know their own capabilities, but also that a leader must know the capabilities of their people and their warriors, and must entrust and organize them within roles that fit their skills. Luffy and Vivi's connection gains a much deeper meaning when it is revealed that Vivi is a descendant of Nefertari di Lili, so a member of the D clan. If we place them in the context of Kogoras, especially considering that Lily was responsible for spreading the poneglyphs across the world, spreading the truthful order that the world must follow if it is to ever achieve balance again, then Luffy and Vivi's encounter entails more than two friends helping one another. Luffy and Vivi's encounter entails two friends belonging to the same clan and the same crew maturing to positions of leadership that will stabilize the web of life. Moving on, if we are to analyze in the context of actual gods and evil gods and align characters who fit with either the Tuatha Dé Dannan and the Fomoire, then firstly, I think I should talk a little bit about the self-entitled gods in the One Piece world, the celestial dragons. It's been about 2 years, I think, since I've seen a thread on Reddit that covered the possible inspiration that the Tuatha Dé Dannan and the Fomoire played in One Piece. And it was actually pretty well explained and concise, so if I find it, I'll definitely put it in the video and put in the description link. But if I don't, and the person is out there, credit to them. There was only one thing in that thread that I didn't necessarily agree with, and it was equating the celestial dragons to the Tuatha Dé Dannan. I don't think the celestial dragons should be equated with the Tuatha Dé Dannan simply because they refer to themselves as gods. Their royal power is repeatedly shown not to be rightful, given that they perpetuate a tyrannical system, and that their governance is facilitated by Emu and his lapdogs, the Five Elders and the Marines. Much like Brez had to seek help from a ruthless Favorian warrior champion, Baylor, in hopes of maintaining his crown. The celestial dragon's manner of governing causes vestiges of their greediness, entitlement, and vicious intolerance to fester in certain countries, while the remaining are destroyed if they cannot pay their tributes or offer loyalty. There's a common thread in One Piece of Luffy helping people reinstate their rightful rulers, and it is often at the aim of criticism by the fandom, given that more or less it's monarch kingdoms. But the thing about these monarchs is that they are valued and wanted by their people. They are shown to possess the aforementioned qualities of a just, merciful, generous, and truthful ruler. They are aware that a leader is nothing if they are disconnected from their people and the land, and that disorder and chaos are sure to follow if they don't comply with their role in the cosmological order. In terms of knowing the cosmological order, while it is not every single ruler in One Piece that knows or even cares about it, the ones that do always belong to lore heavy arcs, going as far back as Arabasta, Skypiea, Fishman Island, and evidently Wano. I know some people don't really like the Fishman Island arc, but the lore there is crazy. And after we get the flashback of Roger visiting the island and see King Neptune, still a prince in training, even at a young age, he knew the power in prophecies and the poneglyphs. And he knew that he had to heed the warnings of the prophecies and the poneglyph. So these leaders know that they are part of something bigger, even if it is on an instinctual level, like Luffy. They know that there is an worldly order that is not just encompassed by their kingdoms, but that they must follow in order for their kingdoms to be balanced. Going back to the celestial dragons, they are nothing more than outsiders making claims on lands that do not belong to them. They don't have the same level of connection that the aforementioned leaders do. They are far removed from the societies and countries that they claim as their own. They aren't concerned with keeping people fed and organized, much less making sure that the warriors from these countries or villages are well versed in their arts, given that if they did, the warriors would definitely fight back. And that's what you have the Revolutionary Army for. The Celestial Dragon's rule is one of the reasons why the One Piece world is severely imbalanced. It is not a coincidence that the dismantling of their power system is coming to a possible end in the final arc. So, the big baddies, so to speak. And yes, I know that, in order to supposedly end them, it would be defeating Emu. I am not discounting Emu's power and Emu's influence. I am also not discounting Blackbeard's influence. And I'll actually talk about him in a second. Okay, so just wait. The Don Quixotes are a great example of the celestial dragon's imbalance and of proving that they're not actual gods. They fell victims of a society left broken and desperately aching for proper emancipation, born from the celestial dragon's tyrannical government and lifestyle. Doflamingo had difficulty letting go of the notion that he should rightfully be a celestial dragon, a king, a god, and he quite literally decided to make everyone else's problem by destabilizing a country and taking it as his own. On top of that, he facilitated the destabilization of Wano by selling smiles to Kaido and Orochi. Meanwhile, Rocinante had no issue assimilating to the inferior population. In fact, he aids Law, who is considered by Rocinante's people to be a direct threat to their existence, the utmost enemy, a devil, yet possibly the correct god. He entrusts Law with information about Dressrosa to impede the looming threat of imbalance. And sure, it ends in the hands of Virgo, but still, it was one of the things that was plaguing Rocinante's mind before he was killed. The downfall of a kingdom, and subsequently the downfall of its people. And this worry for the downfall of a country and what would happen to its people repeats in Luffy as he refuses to end the alliance with Law and refuses to take the opportunities to run away. As he points to Dressrosa, it says, I always thought of Rocinante as an honorary D, not only because he parallels Luffy in this moment, but also because he placed great emphasis on the fact that Law is free. Rocinante instills Law with enough autonomy to determine his rightful place in the world, outside of Doflamingo strings, outside of any discrimination against his condition, his people, his country, and as a carrier of the will of the Di. So Rocinante essentially pushed Law towards accepting his role in the web of life. Also, he died with a subtle smile on his face, and to this day, I cannot watch the backstory without crying like a baby. Let me dream and cope, please. Let me dream and cope. I think there's an underlying interpretation there. The one who saw himself worthy of being a god ruined countries, and the one who aided a supposed devil acted as a catalyst for Law, with the help of Luffy, to achieve balance once again. Let me close this section by highlighting how restoring balance has been prevalent in the series since the beginning of the story, even through the seemingly insignificant adventures. Defeating Captain Morgan, a corrupt marine official, has resulted in a town being rid of tyrannical rule, having trustworthy authorities once again, and having its marines cultivate courage for proper justice. Defeating Buggy, the evil clown, has resulted in Orangetown having its beloved and trusted mayor lead once again. Taking down Don Krieg and Captain Kuro while not having a focus on liberating a country or a village still serves to show what happens when a leader doesn't care for his warriors' lives and takes advantage of their loyalty. That leader is not worthy of his position, is more likely to not be aware of their own capabilities and their own faults, given that they don't trust anyone enough to be able to even tell them that, and they are bound to fail. So, evidently, Luffy is almost always at the forefront of achieving balance by dethroning false rulers. In the second battle of Tuired, the Fovodians aren't held in high regard, but some of them aren't shown to be inherently evil either. They ally themselves with the Tuatha Dé Dannan in order to defeat another oppressive force, the Firbolg. Elata shows great disappointment in his son's greediness in terms of tribute, and his advice places great emphasis on justice and generosity. There's also indication of internal conflict, as some Favorians are admittedly ruthless, but it is evidently frowned upon. Luke is held in high regard, regardless of the fact that his mother is a Fovora, Baylor's daughter at that. But let me quickly provide a context for the latter. Early Celts were a patriarchal society, so Luke's father being a Tuatha Dé only acted as one of the indications that he was better than Braz, given that Braz is Luke's opposite. His mother is Tuatha Dé. Again, I'm providing historical context, so I am not bringing up the question of patriarchy versus matriarchy, especially when it comes to One Piece. That shit doesn't matter. In terms of familial ties, if I were to align with certainty the Tuatha Dé Dannan and the Fovora with One Piece characters, particularly the D clan. Personally, I see the D clan as the equivalent of a crew or multiple crews with leaders belonging to the Great Kingdom. So, not a family related by blood, but more so connected by inherited will. Maybe the leaders were related by blood, but overall, I just place a great emphasis on inherited will. Let's say it like that. For example, I don't see Law being related to Luffy. I don't see Saul being related to Law, and so on and so forth. So if I were to contextualize the second battle of Tuired in terms of One Piece and in terms of the D clan, as I mentioned, My belief before it would be Luke leaning towards the will of a Tuatha Dé ruler, Nuadu, who is concerned with Kogoris, and Braz leaning towards the will of the ruthless Favorian champion, Baylor, who is concerned with oppressive order. But both of these would belong to the same clan. I mentioned the potential multifaceted aspect of the Favorians, given that I am more so driving at the issue of classifying them as inherently evil and just leaving it at that. I think if it was the case that the Favora are like absolute trash, absolutely despicable, and absolutely evil with certainty, that all of them are just scum of the earth, and any Favora descendant will subsequently be scum of the earth, then I think that Luke wouldn't be considered good, regardless of the blood running through his veins, considered divine belonging to a man, since his mother is such an immediate connection to him. And Elata wouldn't have cared for how the Tuatha Dé Dannan would have fared with his son ruling as ineffective as he was. I don't even know. I'm just providing the potential aspect that Fovodans care about people. Moving on, I'll try to be very, very brief about the next notion regarding nature. In Celtic mythology, there's speculation about an underlying agricultural myth, one that places great care in acting in accordance with nature. When Luke wins the battle against Braz and Baylor, he shows mercy to Braz once he doesn't insist on providing advice that acts against the natural order, but rather when Braz presents Luke with a solution for the betterment of agriculture. If you're wondering what this passage means, what's the importance of Tuesdays, I have no idea. I have no idea. But it is the only advice that Braz provides that acts in accordance with nature's cycle. Now, what do multifaceted Fulvodians and agricultural myth have in common? Well, as I mentioned, and you're probably tired of hearing it already, agricultural myth entails accordance with nature. The Favorians, although perceived as evil, still present qualities that indicates that they are aware of Kogoris and its relation with natural order. And the natural order wouldn't be functional without chaos. Thinking of chaos as inherently evil and unnecessary isn't natural. Remember, Kogoris isn't about good versus evil. In its contained disorder, chaos serves a purpose. Nature can be a faint breeze and simultaneously forceful waves. Nature and chaos are intertwined. Therefore, chaos is part of balance. In fact, chaos can be necessary for balance. Plato is probably screaming in his grave right now. Think of water, for example. It is the most precious thing in the world to us, our source of life. And yet, water, in its sublime nature, it's also very haunting. Water often falls under the mythological motif that attributes it as the embodiment of chaos. This motif is present in mythologies from all over the world, from ancient Egypt, Sumerians, ancient Persians, the Greeks, etc. Humans and anthropomorphic deities also embody chaos in a way. At times, we see the Tuatha Dé or the Favorians present chaotic traits. Let me just cut to the chase here. You're probably like, if you're caught onto it, you're probably like, just get on with it. Get on with it. My bias is so clear. All of this is bringing me to the fact that one of Law's last names is Water. But bear with me for a second. Bear with me. Spera. Spera aí. is not just about law, okay? I'm gonna talk about Blackbeard in a second. Just hold on. I think it's worth noting that if not for law, the path of staring up the storm wouldn't have taken the worldly level that it did. I think it's pretty significant, law being one of the D that saved Luffy, so the bearer of miracles and sun god, and being the one that devised a plan that resulted in the destruction of two pillars of powers, one belonging to the world government and another belonging to pirates. Regardless of the plan not necessarily being fulfilled the way that he envisioned and being fueled by vengeance and his potential suicide. And yes, I know, okay, before like someone goes in a comment and it's like,
Shut the fuck up about law, please.
it's like I know that it wasn't just him, but it was a calculated storm. Okay? He directed the explosion that is Luffy where he needed him to be. It could be a coincidence that Law has water as one of his last names. I mean, Oda was sleep deprived and probably functioning on 5 weeks worth of coffee when he invented these characters. So who knows? Who knows if he even remembers that Law has water as her last name? But for the purpose of this video, I am going to interpret it as Law being an example of divine or natural chaos. Law, unlike Luffy, knows that he's part of something bigger. He was one of the driving forces behind dismantling an unnatural power system, one that, in its oppressive illusion of order, breeds nothing more than broken societies and the destruction of land, something that he's well acquainted with. A good example of the opposite is Blackbeard, and you're probably sighing in relief that I'm moving on. Blackbeard also fits with the motif of imbalance and chaos, but unlike Doflamingo, he actually fits with a tribe of gods or the tribe of evil gods. And he, unlike Luffy, Law, and Vivi, isn't concerned with reinstating rightful rulers, cultivating a healthy hierarchy, or achieving balance through chaos. At first, I wasn't even sure if he was a real D, but he sure is a freaking dick. And I was operating on the potential parallelism that he could have with celestial dragons in terms of how they call themselves gods but are false gods. So I thought that he uh believed himself to be member of the D clan and that he had ancestors that belonged to the D clan, but it's just a lie that he told himself so he could, act like he's the potential chosen one. And I was operating on this belief more so because of what Whitebeard said to him during the Marineford arc, how he's not the one. He's not that much different than celestial dragons in that he keeps slaves in Hachinoso Island and is a coward when push comes to shove, fearing death in a way that these usually don't. But then there was a proper introduction to Rox D. Xebec, and if anyone is following his will, that someone is Teach. He conquered Hachinoso Island, which was significant for Xebec. He fancies himself worthy of a Blackbeard kingdom, and his conversation with Aokiji during his recruitment borders on Doflamingo's speech during Marineford. Those in power decide what justice truly means. And that greedy nature is reflective of Zebek's dream of being king of the world. What separates Teach and Xebec from the Celestial Dragons is that while they are scum and they don't really care about other people's lives other than their own, uh, they still have traits that are reminiscent of the good D. If I see a single phallic joke Xebec, like Roger, wanted to know the truth of the world, what transpired during the Void Century, and how does it connect to the world government. Teach possesses a hopeful spirit, much like Luffy's when he hit us with that iconic quote, "Dreams will never die." I think, like Bress, they allow unnatural chaos and oppressive order to dictate how they navigate through the world, with no intent of utilizing chaos and order to serve its purposes in accordance with Kogoris. And like Bress, although they possibly have the equivalent of a Tuatha Dé Dannan ancestry, even if they try to fill in Joy Boy and Roger's shoes, their instincts don't seem to be aligned with a will that follows a divine order. An example of a will aligned with divine order, because while I provided examples of instinct connected with Kogoris, I still think that in terms of an inherited will, it's different. Luffy and Law, and any D for that matter, are different in the sense that inherited will dictates if they are gods or evil gods, or if they have divine or even devilish aspect in their souls that connects them with their ancestors. An example of the latter could be how Luffy and Law, despite acting on a whim, it somehow yields miracles. To reinforce what I said in the beginning of the video, do I think that these themes and motifs are being used exclusively, going as far as being perceived in a metatextual sense, like the Buddhist mythology is? No. I'm simply analyzing One Piece through Celtic mythology lens. Maybe it influenced Oda. Maybe it didn't. But much like every story, every mythology, there are threads that connect theme and motifs worldwide. Nothing that is so is so. Everything is a representation of a representation. So, an overlap of ancient storytelling in contemporary literature is bound to happen, whether intentionally or not. Even if its foundation isn't Celtic themes and motifs, the Will of the D certainly has a role in restoring balance in the One Piece world. Whether it imparts from Luffy liberating countries and helping his friends establish their own will in the world, or Dragon helping the oppressed fight and establish their own fair countries with their own rightful rulers, or Law alongside Luffy achieving vengeance by dethroning false kings and destroying tyrannical empires. The D sure stir up major storms, and in the process bring forth the question of rightful rulers, truthful gods, and acting in accordance with an ancient great kingdom's order. E é isso aí, gente. Acabou. I'm pretty sure that I butchered old Irish names, so if I did, please let me have it in the comments. Within 3 seconds, you'll see that English is not my first language, so expecting me not to butcher old Irish names? That's adorable of you. I want to emphasize that I am not a scholar, okay? I don't have decades of studying Celtic mythology under my belt. I just had 2 classes in college and a very active fixation during the 2 years that I was studying that. So I'm relying on knowledge bestowed to me in a country that's not even near any of the Celtic nations. So there's that. I don't have the context of folk tales, of the way that they tell their mythology. So if there's anything wrong, right? I'm human, I'm capable of mistakes. So if there's anything wrong, please let me know in the comments and I'll definitely keep in mind moving forward. The traditions and the beliefs, like everything that I talked about, is definitely more nuanced. That's why I said that it's very brief. It really is. It's definitely more nuanced, but that will be a 40-hour video. So, as I said in the beginning of the video, for part two, I will cover Welsh mythology, particularly some stories belonging to the Mabinogi, and I will probably add a little bit of Irish mythology again, that being the Tuain. So, um, there's that. There will be more context. Absolutely. I will delve deeper into traditions and into beliefs as well, just like I did in this video, and perhaps elaborate more on the traditions and beliefs that I talked about in this video. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments, whether you are familiar with Celtic mythology or this is your first time hearing about it. If you're into fandom discourse and fandom shipping, I have a video essay where I cover the shift in fandom and shipping and how capitalism, social isolation, moral purity, and the lack of media literacy is affecting fandom and shipping overall. So if that sounds like it's something you're interested, I'll definitely leave it here and please check it out. Thank you so much if you've watched until the end. I hope you enjoyed the video and I'll see you in part 2. E aí, fellow humans! If you liked this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and please don't forget to check me out on other social media. Ciao! Humans and anthropomorphism. Lá vem essa palavra. Eu não aguento. Eu não aguento. Entendeu? Eu não consigo. Anthropomorphic. Humans and anthropomorphic. You can do this, bitch. Get it together, okay? You speak English, okay? You went to 4 years in college and you spoke with people and you had conversations and you had discussions. Get it together. I'm so hungry and I'm sleep deprived and I've been trying to record this for 5 days in a row. I need to sleep. Blackbeard, ai, por favor. Para, por favor. This is not the time to have a mental breakdown. Fuck. Blackbeard also fits the motif. Que saco, mano. Não. Dá não.